I'm Professor Margaret Levy from the United States Studies Center, and I would like to welcome you here on behalf of the Center and on behalf of the New South Wales Department of Trade and Investment. They keep changing their names, so I wanted to make sure I had it correct. We have several dignitaries in the room that I'd like to welcome, several consuls and consul generals, and I understand we have the Vice Chancellor and Deputy Vice Chancellor of Battambang University in Cambodia, so welcome to you. I was told not to try to pronounce your names because I would mangle them. I am very pleased to introduce Joe Bozich to you. The Huffington Post labeled him as the ultimate game changer in style in 2010. He was in a list of very eminent people. There were 100 game changers, and they included people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Melinda Gates. And Joe Bozich deservedly was way up there with them, and you're going to hear why today. The New York Times ran a front page article in its Suddenly business section on him, which is a very unusual thing to do. I learned about it almost before I woke up because Professor Michael Hiscox from Harvard, who is also here and from the U.S. Studies Center, alerted to me. My little text message went off, Joe is in the news. They finally opened Alta Gracia and got the kind of attention that they deserve. So why has there been so much fuss about Joe Bozich? Well, as one article says, he's a man who makes sweatshirts without sweatshops. That's a really important thing to do. We were trying to figure out last night at dinner how many people have ever done anything like that. I came up with Robert Owen in the early 19th century. There was one other name that we thought might possibly be doing something like that. But basically, he's a real path breaker to really create a business model in which sweatshirts are made without sweatshops. How many of you know where the clothes you are wearing were made? How many of you care? That should be more. Well, I know where my clothes were made, and I know that they were made under conditions in which workers were treated well. But Joe, relatively well. But Joe has gone way beyond that. If we think about a continuum of the ways in which we can have equitable working conditions, he's really the gold standard. And there's no one even close. There are lots of firms that are doing their best. So Joe Bozich is the CEO of Knights Apparel, which is the largest supplier of collegiate apparel in the United States. Nike is second, just to give you a sense of the scale here. I understand from the wonderful article about him in the Australian today that they do about $300 million worth of business every year. Is that right, Joe? More or less. So said the Australian. You can correct it. They have exclusive rights to the NBA, which is the National Basketball Association, and to the NHL, which is the National Hockey League, not to the AFL, but I guess he's going to work on that. And there are a few American football teams, too, that Knights Apparel works with. Joe went to Vanderbilt University. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. And he was the 1985 NCAA. I'll tell you what that means. We too have lots of acronyms in the United States. The National Collegiate Athletic Association bodybuilding champion. And that led him to become the spokesperson for something called Gold's Gym, and led to other businesses and an interest in not just sports, but sports apparel and how to produce it in appropriate ways. That led to him starting a very successful business of his own, Knights Apparel, ultimately. As his business grew and as his conversations increased with student groups, advocacy organizations, workers in his plants, and unions, as well as with his own conscience, Joe decided to start a factory and a brand that pays a living wage and gives workers the benefit and working conditions they need to lead productive lives, and equally importantly, to ensure that their children have a way out of poverty and opportunities that their parents never had. Moreover, he was able to persuade his board that there was a good business model in doing the right thing. You can pay the workers, pay your investors, and please consumers, and you can also make money by actually running a factory that pays a living wage. Alta Gracia, about which you'll soon hear more, is the result of his considerable efforts and commitments. Few, far too few CEOs, and we live in a period of very greedy CEOs, very few have made the decisions Joe Bozich has made. Alta Gracia is a very moving story. I am delighted to introduce Joe Bozich so that he can share it with you. Thank you, Joe.
Good afternoon. I have to admit I'm very impressed. I told Margaret when I was coming in that on a beautiful day like this, if you get students to come into a room to listen to me talk, I would be very impressed. Must be much more disciplined than students in the United States. In addition to Margaret, I'd like to thank some other people. I'd like to thank Jeff Garrett from the United States Study Center, Kylie Hargraves from the New South Wales government, and my friend Michael Hiscox from Harvard University. I'd like to thank all of you for allowing me to be here and for inviting me to share something with you that I am extremely passionate about: corporate social responsibility and our company's unique ethical business model that we call the Alta Gracia Project, whose mission is changing lives one shirt at a time. So here's what I thought I'd share with you today. A little bit on my background and how I got into the apparel business and who Knights Apparel is today. I'm going to share with you my personal story and why I'm so passionate about corporate social responsibility and how that partially led to the birth of our ethical business model, Alta Gracia. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the business case behind Alta Gracia, some of the logic that led us to believe that doing good in good business could go hand in hand. And then last, I thought I'd share with you some of the results. When we started this initiative a year and a half ago, there were a lot of questions. There was a lot of unknowns. And a year and a half later, I can share with you some of the factual results. How have labor rights groups responded to this initiative? How have students and student activists responded? How have the retailers that have partnered with us in the United States, what the results have been for them? And most importantly, I want to share with you a little bit on how this initiative has truly impacted some of our employees and people who are working in the factory making this clothing. So, a little bit on my background and how I got into the apparel business. It was not something I intended to do. As Margaret mentioned, I got into the apparel business through the fitness industry. I went to Vanderbilt University, where I was a pre-med student, degrees in math and chemistry. And while I was there, I got involved in competitive weightlifting. Can't tell by looking at me today, but I did. And my senior year, I won a national championship. And as a result of that, I had 3 companies in the United States call me up and offer to sponsor me, and they said, you know, Joe, move to California, keep competing, you can endorse our products, and we'll pay you to do that. So I called up my father, who was a plumber by trade. My grandparents immigrated from Croatia. My father didn't get a high school degree, and he thought out of one of his 7 kids he was going to get a doctor, and after 4 years at the university, I had to tell him that I decided I was going to move to California and keep weightlifting instead. Wasn't a pleasant conversation. So anyway, after I finished competing, I went to work for one of the companies that sponsored me, Gold's Gym, and in 1987 I started their consumer products division. What we basically did is brought products with that brand name to retailers: apparel, fitness equipment, nutritional supplements. And later on I decided to go into business for myself. I left Gold's Gym, and 12 years ago I started the company that I have today, Knights Apparel. And as Margaret mentioned, we are one of the largest suppliers of sports licensed apparel in the United States today. We have rights to the National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, some of the football teams, the NASCAR racing teams. And in the collegiate space, we have become the largest supplier of college apparel in the United States. It's estimated that the collegiate market is about a $4 billion a year industry, and in 2007, we passed up Nike to gain #1 market share in this space. So just for fun, before we get into a more serious topic, I'm going to show you a picture of what I used to look like before I got into the apparel industry. A quick story, my oldest son came to me one day, and after he realized, the size of this business that we had built, and he said, "Dad, you started this 12 years ago, and you've got #1 market share competing against these multi-billion-dollar sports marketing companies. Don't you worry about somebody coming along and doing the same thing and being a startup and taking your business away from you?" So I went into this long speech with him about, well, Joe, you got to remember where you came from, and always focus on trying to improve even the things that you're good at, and stay humble and really appreciate everything that you've been. So after a while, he started grinning, and I could tell that he really was just joking around and was messing with me. And he said, "Dad," he goes, "I have a guaranteed way where you can have no future competitors." So I was like, "All right, Joey, how's that?" And he said, "All you have to do is show people what you used to look like. And when they see what the apparel industry has done to you, nobody in their right mind would ever go into your business." So in my family, this picture we call before apparel, and then what's standing before you they call after apparel. So I'm the only person that you're ever going to meet who's lost 70 pounds and his waist has gone up by 6 inches. That's an accomplishment. All right, so anyway, on to an important topic, and our ethical business model and why I'm so passionate about this in my personal story. When we first launched this initiative, the New York Times heard about it, and they called up and they said, "Hey, we'd like to go to the factory, we'd like to travel and meet with you and meet with your employees and basically find out if this is real." So we said, sure. So they hopped on a plane and they met us down in the Dominican Republic. And I guess the question that they asked me that most people ask when we talk about this, that they want to know the most is, why are you doing this? And of course, there is a business reason. We are a for-profit company, and there's a business motive behind why I'm doing what we're doing. But what they really want to know is, no, we want to know why is it personal to you? Why are you personally motivated to do this? And so I gave them this quote, which they had in the Times, and I basically said, after what I've been through, I just decided that I needed my life and my business to be more than just gaining market share and making a bottom line. So I thought I'd share with you the story behind that, and I think it will help you understand just why this is so personal to me and why I'm so passionate about it. I went through a series of tragic events while I was building my business, and they changed my life and they changed my views of what I wanted to do with my life and what I wanted to do with my business. Everything I'm going to describe to you happened in about 11-month period of time. It started with one family member passing away at 37, leaving behind 3 small kids, and after that, the youngest of my 7 brothers and sisters was killed in a tragic accident at 25. After that, one of my children became extremely ill, and we had a really hard time finding the correct diagnosis. And so we would go to a doctor, and they say, "Well, this is what we think it is," and my child would have hope. And long story short, this went on off and on for over a year, and we just really had a tough time finding the correct diagnosis for a cure. And I remember him saying to me one day, "Dad, if you can't make the pain go away, I can't live like this." And eventually they lost hope and tried to commit suicide. And after that, while that was going on, another family member was diagnosed with terminal cancer, given 6 months to live. And 1 week later, I temporarily lost my vision and found out that I have an incurable disease called multiple sclerosis. So all of that happened in a very short window of time, and it was the first time in my life that I'd ever felt fear. And it wasn't the fear of being disabled. It was the fear of not being able to support, protect, and take care of my family. But the good news for me was I always had hope, because I had been blessed with the resources. I could get the best medical care. I could take time off from work, and I didn't have to worry about my job. I didn't have to worry about paying bills. And it really made me think about because what I describe, people go through every day. That's not unique to me, what I just described. I'm sure there's Everybody in this room has somebody that they know, family member, friend, who's gone through similar things. But it really made me think about, knowing how difficult it was for me with all of these resources, what about somebody going through these same things who didn't have hope? What about somebody who knew maybe there is a treatment available for me, my wife, my child, but it's not available to me because I can't afford it? And what about somebody going through those things, but then on top of it, struggling just to put food on the table, a roof over their family's heads? And so it made me ask, is there some way you can use your business to provide hope for someone who might not have it today? And I thought, how awesome would it be if you could wake up and what you do every single day for work could have a life-changing impact on the lives of people that your business touches. So that became my passion, to see how could we do that. So those are the personal motives that led to the birth of our ethical business model that we called Alta Gracia. And that's really what Alta Gracia is all about. Alta Gracia is about providing hope. It's about fighting poverty one t-shirt at a time. It's about making a life-changing difference in the lives of people, their families, and the community where this apparel is manufactured. And as I mentioned, it's a pathway out of poverty. And it's also about creating a choice. This initiative is about creating a choice where consumers can know that their purchasing decision can be a force for good. And this is how we're doing it. In the Alta Gracia factory, we not only pay wages that are required by law, but every employee receives what's called a living wage. Simple way of describing that is, we asked and answered the question, how much money would every employee need to receive in order to be able to meet all of life's necessities, not just for themselves as an individual, but for their family. So that means food and water, clothing, housing, energy, medical care, child care, transportation, and in education. We built into our wages enough money so parents could afford to send their children to school, get an education, because we think that's the long-term way of breaking the cycle of poverty. And to our knowledge, this is the first and only apparel brand where it's been independently verified that the employees actually do receive a living wage. So now let's talk about the business case behind Alta Gracia. All of that sounds well and good, but we're a business. We're a private business, but we have very large, multi-billion-dollar institutional investors. So just for a minute, and I'd love to tell me your answer to this question when we're done. But I want you to imagine that you're on my board of directors, and you've invested tens of millions of dollars in my business, and you walk into the boardroom one day, and I come in and I say, hey guys, I got this great idea. Let's invest millions of dollars in building factories, and we'll pay our employees 350% higher wages than what's required by law, and we'll build a brand not based upon celebrity endorsements or proprietary designs and fabrics, but based upon the working conditions for the people who make the apparel. What would you think? Probably what my board members did. One of the guys told me later, he goes, I just assumed that whatever you were doing to yourself or putting in your body when you were doing that bodybuilding stuff, you finally just lost it. So I actually did spend a lot of time building the business case. As I mentioned, we are a for-profit organization. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders to not pursue just what is personable to me, but what's in the best interest of the corporation. So I built the business case for Alta Gracia and spent a lot of time doing research, and fortunately, the more research we did, the more I became convinced that this can be a viable, sustainable business model. So I'm just going to share with you some of the slides briefly, some of the points that I went over with my board to convince them that this was not only the right thing to do, but that really could be good business. This is one study that's come out that talks about global demand by consumers for greater corporate responsibility. And really interesting comment, what they found through the study was it said that 94% of all consumers, if price and quality is similar, but one brand is associated with a good cause, that they would switch brands. That's a staggering number, 94%. And they said the bottom line to the research is this: consumers around the world want companies to be a force for good, both in the way they do business and in devoting their resources to address societal issues. And then just as important, they said, consumers will reward brands and companies who are doing the right thing, but also they will punish companies that don't. That got their attention. The rise of ethical shopping is another study that had come out that talked about why consumers are becoming more ethical, and said that they're increasingly trying to find ways to make their purchases more purposeful, whether it be fair trade products or products that support a cause. And it explains why ethical shopping is on the rise. And talked about, especially going through a recession and troubled times, social ills such as homelessness, hunger, poverty have hit closer to home, and these have made people more conscious, more aware. And then lastly, some of the real factual numbers that I shared with them. It's estimated by the end of 2011 that $57 billion will be spent on ethical products. $57 billion. Pretty large consumer base. And they said it's growing. And then there was other examples I could give them. For example, fair trade products. 10 years ago, fair trade products almost didn't exist. Today, it's almost a $6 billion industry worldwide, and you can find fair trade products anywhere from a specialty store like a Starbucks to the most price-sensitive retailer in the United States. Walmart carries fair trade products. They're doing this because there's a growing demand by consumers for products that support good causes. So these were just some of the things that, obviously there was years worth of research that went into this before we launched the initiative, but we actually did, and convinced my board and my investors that doing good and good business could go hand in hand. So based upon these personal motives and the business case that we built a year and a half ago, we launched this new brand in the United States called Alta Gracia on college campuses across the country. And now what I'm going to do is share with you some of the results. As I said, when we started this, there was lots of skepticism, and despite the reports and the studies, people said what people say is one thing, but when it comes to taking money out of their wallet, they do something differently. So I'm just going to share with you some of the factual results. It really, I like to say all the time, really doesn't matter what I think. The results speak for themselves. So one of the questions was, how are the labor rights groups going to respond to this? And this group that made this quote is called the Workers' Rights Consortium. It's one of the largest labor rights watchdog groups in the United States. And they basically said in the 15 years of labor code compliance, hundreds of thousands of CSR programs, no brand has ever done what Knights Apparel is doing in the Alta Gracia factory. And one of the things I learned from working with labor rights groups is that transparency is the key to credibility. So when we launched this initiative, I went to this group who basically what they do is they investigate labor violations of corporations, and they expose the corporations and brands and put pressure on you to fix the problem. And so I went to them and said, I'm thinking about doing this. If I do this, will you come in every single month, put somebody on the ground, we'll put an office in the factory, and we'll open our books and records and provide complete transparency to you. And they have. So every month they come in and they audit the factory's books and records, and they publish the results publicly on their website so the consumer can know that the claims we're making are real. How did the students respond? One of the things I was told was that, Joe, even if you do this, the student activists, all they do is find something to attack. They're not going to support anything. And these were kind of the headlines that were typically in college campuses across the country. The headlines usually said things like student stage demonstration, and talk about poverty wages, forced overtime, severe union repression, sweatshops and slave labor. And students in the United States have been campaigning for higher labor standards on college campuses for the past decade. There's one group in particular called USAS, United Students Against Sweatshops, that have been having these campaigns on college campuses. And over the years, I started sitting in on a lot of these meetings. As the largest supplier, they were coming to me and saying, "What are you doing, Joe Bozich? What are you doing to make things better?" And after sitting in many of these meetings, when I stopped being defensive and I sat back and I really listened to the students, this is what I heard. I heard them say, "We want to take pride in our university, and we want to wear products that have our university logo to show our pride and our allegiance to our university, but at the same time, we want to take pride under the conditions in which it's made." I mean, that's really what I heard them saying. And I have to say that it's the passion from the students as much as any business study that convinced me that if we went forward with this initiative, they would support it and it would be successful. And since then, since the launch of Alta Gracia, these are some of the headlines that have come out of these same student groups that people told me they'll never rally behind something positive. And this is a typical response from one of the student groups. And they said that they're wholeheartedly committing to collaborating with the faculty, university administrators, and bookstore personnel to promote Alta Gracia. I can tell you those are words that have never come out of these activist groups in support of a corporation and a brand before. And one story, I was with the University of Wisconsin president, and he told me that he had a group of students come into his office and demand to meet with him. And I was like, I had nothing to do with it. I did not instigate it. And he said, no, it was all positive. He said they came in and they basically said, "We want to thank you for supporting this initiative. We just want to say thank you, and we want to know, is there anything that we can do as a student group to help support the University of Alta Gracia and create awareness?" So they came up with the bookstore on campus, and developed this flyer that talked about Alta Gracia, what made it unique, and why the university was supportive of it. And these students distributed 20,000 flyers around the city of Madison to help create awareness and drive consumers to the retailers that were supporting this initiative, something that's never been happened before. Students, we've done exit polls. Again, these are just factual results of what has happened, where consumers have said why they're buying the product. So this is a typical statement. It said that, "I know that if I want to buy a Gator t-shirt, Florida Gators, and this one brand in the store had some redeeming social quality that will make someone's life better, I'll make that choice." Typical comment that we hear from consumers who are buying the product. And this is another student group in the United States. They're on about 200 college campuses across the country. It's called United Students for Fair Trade. And they just recently had a national convention in Washington, D.C., and they decided that they were going to make Alta Gracia their main campaign for this next coming school year, so that across the country they want to use their membership to create awareness of the brand and help the consumer understand this is the difference you can make in these people's lives who are making this apparel through your purchasing decisions. So we're very, very proud of the support that we've gotten from the student groups. How's the media responded? Again, these are just a few examples I mentioned before. Typically, the headlines have been around police block off sweatshop rally, student stage, sit-in and demonstration. Shortly after the New York Times article broke, Time magazine did a story on Alta Gracia. And this was the headline. It just simply said, "Buy this product." What's the opposite of a boycott? How about a boycott? And then they went on to talk about what makes this product and brand unique. Another headline, "Clothes that make a difference. Alta Gracia clothing makes a stand against poverty." And none of these headlines, there's hundreds of headlines and stories like this. We didn't pay for any of them. This was all students and consumers on their own, the media deciding to tell the Alta Gracia story. This was interesting. Margaret mentioned it early on. The Huffington Post every year nominates what they call 100 game changers. And as she mentioned, I was very humbled to be nominated. And I was like, what am I doing here with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and they had all these famous people, and then there's the old idiot bodybuilder up there, and 3 million people voted, and they picked Alta Gracia. And they didn't pick it because of me, but they picked it because of what this initiative stood for. Again, consumer spoke. What's happened at retail? Again, this is something that we were challenged on. People said, Joe, you do this, it's going to fail. People aren't going to pay more money. They're not going to pay a premium for a product that's marketed based upon the labor standards for the people who make it. They were wrong. The sales of this product have been as good as all the major brands that it's competing against. Duke University was one of the first universities to really step up, and right away before we had even launched the product, they said, we're going to commit $250,000 to our one bookstore, and we're going to display it, market it, and tell the story. And this is a quote that they made recently. They said, it's exceeding our expectations in terms of sales and profitability. Proof that it's good business financially for retailers to support products that are socially responsible. To date, they've sold over $1 million of this product just in that one bookstore. This is another retailer called Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble, it's interesting, they are the largest bookstore retailer in the United States. And they were supportive of the initiative when we started. They said, hey, we'll try it, we'll put it out there, and we'll let the market and the consumer dictate what happens. And they did. And a year and a half later, they flew down to the factory with me, and they said, we want to go meet the workers ourselves. We want to go talk to them. We want to hear from them what impact our business is having on their lives. And just a month ago, they made the decision that they were going to convert the largest volume clothing program they have in all of their stores across the United States to Alta Gracia. And this is a public company. This is not a private, this is a large public company, again, that has a responsibility to do what's in the financial best interest of that corporation, and they decided their financial best interest was making Alta Gracia the largest college t-shirt program they have in their stores across the country. So the last thing I want to share with you was the results, which are the most important results, and that's how has this really impacted the people that are making this apparel. The term living wage, generally translated in Spanish, translates to salario digno. That means a wage with dignity. And Georgetown University has been doing a study measuring the impact of paying a living wage on the workers since we started it. And they asked the workers themselves, tell us what this means to you. What do these jobs and the work that you're doing mean? And these are some of the quotes. They're typical of the employees. It says, it means the right to health. Living dignified means having the security of money and not living day to day, not knowing if you'll be able to make ends meet, not having everything left up to chance. They said to live dignified means to have a bathroom inside, being able to eat 3 times a day, being able to get an education, and being able to have your children get an education. I had a few slides in here that we put in just to share with you, how do you tell the story to the consumer, how we're marketing it. What we've done is we decided that our celebrities are going to be our employees. So this product is marketed in all the retailers. We've created point-of-purchase signs that has a story from one of the employees, where they simply talk about what your purchase, telling the consumer, when you buy this product, this is what it means to me and my family, and why. This is Pablo. He says, my son goes to school because of these clothes. This is Maritza. She runs the union who's in the factory. He said, these clothes have changed my family's life. I hope you enjoy wearing them. And every garment has an individual hang tag with a picture of one of our celebrities, our workers, our employees, telling their personal story to the consumer over how your decision to buy this brand versus another, the impact that it's having on my life and my family. This is a picture of our Alta Gracia family. And then what we're going to do here real quick, so you can stop listening to me for a bit, we were going to originally try to do a Skype call, which we've done frequently, and have some of the workers get on here and you could ask them questions and talk to them directly. Didn't work out because of the time zone, so instead what we're going to do is show you a short video that CBS in the United States, again, heard about it, said, we want to go see it. So they flew down to the factory and they did a short documentary that was broadcast to 6 million students around the United States, and thought we'd play that for you.
When you're rooting for your favorite college sports team, you may think wearing a college t-shirt or hat is a good way to show off your pride. But as Adriana Diaz explains, it's also a way to change the lives of those in a struggling country.
Duke University's school store has all the basics: hoodies, tees, and lots of school pride. But there's one thing they have in stock that might surprise you: messages from the factory workers who made the gear on the shelves.
These clothes have changed my family's life. I hope you enjoy wearing them, she says. Wow, that's pretty cool.
The workers are from the Alta Gracia clothing factory in the Dominican Republic, a Spanish-speaking country that shares an island with Haiti. All these clothes have the Alta Gracia label that tells shoppers about the people they're supporting by buying these clothes.
I personally would go for cheaper clothes, or, oh, I have the best deal. But then to look at this and go, well, it's only a few extra dollars to me, and it's a whole change of life for them. That's a big deal.
So why are these clothes life-changing? Well, I went to the Dominican Republic to find out. I met Maritza Vargas at the Alta Gracia factory, which makes clothes for more than 350 U.S. colleges. She makes a living making college t-shirts that eventually get tagged with her picture. How does it make you feel that your picture is on all the t-shirts and clothes that get sold?
Me siento como si yo fuera Jennifer.
I feel like I was Jennifer Lopez, totally famous.
Famosa.
How has your life changed since you started working here at Alta Gracia?
Bueno, mi vida me ha cambiado muy,
Well, my life
muy
has changed very
drásticamente, ya que
drastically.
puedo
I'm
pensar
better
que
able
tenemos
to
una
feed
mejor
my
alimentación
children.
para mis hijos.
My son can go to university. He had to stop studying until I was able to work to send him to college.
That's because the Alta Gracia factory is trying something new, paying workers what's called a living wage. So what workers earn is based on the amount of money they actually need to support a family.
Ya puedo comprar queso.
Now I can buy cheese, butter, condiments, ketchup, mayonnaise, which my kids like, but we didn't have.
So before you didn't have ketchup in your house. Antes no tenía ketchup en su casa.
No, no tenía ketchup.
No, we didn't have ketchup in my house. Having ketchup was like reaching for the stars.
Maritza's living wage is based on a calculation made by the Workers' Rights Consortium, a nonprofit group that helps workers around the world.
We go through all of the basic categories, so food and nutrition for their family, housing, so beds and sheets and towels, education, healthcare, whatever you can imagine that you need in order to make ends meet in a normal month, that's included in the living wage.
That amount is $2.83 an hour in the Dominican Republic, more than 3 times the minimum wage or the amount required by law, which is 85 cents. It's that low minimum wage that attracts companies from other countries because it's cheap to make their products here. But it can also attract sweatshop operations, where people work long hours in poor conditions and where companies don't pay minimum wage or obey labor laws. Something Alta Gracia is trying to change.
This is the first time in the apparel industry where workers are being compensated with salaries that are enough for them really to get by.
It's helped Maritza, who made minimum wage at her old factory job, and she says it just wasn't enough to pay the bills.
I was thinking of separating the family, stop renting our house, to be able to pay little by little what I owed.
This is the 2-bedroom house Maritza almost lost, a tight squeeze for her family of 5.
This is where my kids sleep. Oh, it's so ugly. This is where we bathe. There's no water at the moment because the water's cut. Sometimes it gets cut and then it comes back.
But now that Maritza's salary has tripled at Alta Gracia, she says everything has changed. Her son is back in school, and after class he can be seen on the family's new computer, something they could never afford before. Do you have Facebook?
Yes.
Sí.
Yes.
Me gusta.
I like to chat on Facebook.
And her son will soon be updating his Facebook status from somewhere else, because the family's moving into the house of their dreams.
We're going up to my new house. Oh, I'm going to live like a rich person. This is going to be my son's room. Here they're going to have privacy. This is their own bathroom that's in perfect condition.
Y aquí voy a
And
tener una
here, I'm
terraza.
going to have a terrace.
Eso es
This
toda
is
una
all
película.
amazing. In the other place right now, there isn't water to bathe. But here, we have water. Now that problem is solved.
Maritza says this is all possible because of the people who buy Alta Gracia's products on U.S. campuses.
Ahora está en las manos de
It's
todos
in their
ustedes,
hands that we're
de que
able to
nosotros
continue to
podamos
send our
seguir
kids to
mandando
school
nuestros hijos a la
so that they can be
escuela, y que en un
professionals
futuro
and
puedan
make it
ser
out of the poverty
profesionales
that we're
y salir
all
de la
in.
pobreza que estamos metidos.
If you want to practice your Spanish skills and hear Maritza using her own voice without the English dubbing, head over to channel1.com. Well, that does it for our show today. I'm Jessica Kumari, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Produced in partnership with CBS News.
This project a year and a half ago, these were just some of the questions that we asked ourselves. Can doing good and good business go hand in hand? Can profit and purpose go together? Will consumers buy a product and brand that's marketed based upon being socially responsible? And most important, can you change a life by buying a t-shirt? As consumers, we have the power to change lives through our purchasing decisions. And when I started this initiative, I kept this quote in front of me, especially with all the skepticism. And I'll share it with you. It says, once we know and are aware, we're responsible for our action and our inaction. We can do something about it or ignore it, but either way, we're still responsible. And that's how I feel as a business leader. And I hope the students who are going to be the future business leaders in this room that you'll feel the same way when you get out there in the business world and know that you have an opportunity to make a difference, whatever your platform is, whatever you do. I've been doing this for 24 years, and I can tell you it's the most rewarding and gratifying initiative that I've ever been involved in. I'm prouder than this than any other accomplishment we've achieved with the business, and every day I get up and doing things like this makes me feel like my life has real purpose and real meaning. So I thank you for listening, and thank you for your interest in what we're doing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to move over there now, and we're going to take questions from all of you and have a little more discussion of what you've done.
Great.
Okay, anybody have some questions that you'd like to ask of Joe? Don't be shy. Yes, why don't you introduce yourself? There are microphones coming.
G'day, George Papanicolaou is my name. Yeah, Joe, I just wanted to ask you, I've got a particular interest in music, so I go to a lot of concerts, and I see the price of t-shirts, merchandising t-shirts at concerts is extremely high, and I think it's a factor that with the loss of revenue from other avenues like CD sales, artists are feeling, and they imagine feeling compelled to factor in extra costs to make up for that. So just wondering in your business whether there are different kinds of extra pricing factors involved in different streams of the business that are aimed at different targets, like in the music industry or to do with big fashion labels or what have you. So I just wonder if you could comment on whether you have different kind of pricing structures for different markets.
Okay.
Are you asking, is the question, how are we pricing and marketing this product? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, in different sort of markets or with different customers in mind and so forth?
Well, in the college space, one of the things that we made the decision to do when we started this initiative, and this was based upon, again, research and studies and what consumers have said, they said that they would, 94% said that they would switch brands if one was associated with a good cause, but they also made two important comments. They said if the quality and the price was similar. So what we've done with this new brand is we've priced it at the same prices of other major brands in the same channel of distribution. So for example, if you go into a college bookstore in the United States, the Alta Gracia t-shirt might be $18, which would be the same price as a Nike t-shirt or an Adidas t-shirt or an Under Armour t-shirt. And we made that decision to do it that way, and the way we're able to do it is is we're still giving the retailers the profit margin that they need to make it financially. We're not asking them to sacrifice profits to support it, and we're simply taking a slightly lower margin than we would normally take as a company and supplying it to them.
Yeah, that was what I was getting at, whether there's a different offset and who was taking the hit. Obviously, somebody would be happy
We are.
to.
Let me follow up on that, though, Joe, because I believe you told me that by the end of this year that is likely to change, that it's become so successful.
Well, yeah, obviously with volume, the great thing about having a company like ours and having the scale and size that we do when I started this initiative is we're obviously a profitable business and we have our overhead covered from a lot of the different programs and businesses that we run. So I'm able to take a lower margin on this as a company because I already have the infrastructure in place, and we just decided, okay, we'll work off a lower margin. But the reality is we now have enough volume. We did subsidize this factory for the first 2 years. We're a year and a half into it. We're into our second year, and by the start of our third season, which will be this July, August, we'll have enough volume, enough critical mass from enough retailers who said they would test it, and based upon its success, this is a sustainable business, sustainable and profitable business model for us. And to go from a startup to 3 years later to be profitable is a pretty good business model.
I just was wondering, hello? Yeah. I'm just wondering if do you see any limits in the expansion of this model, which of course is so impressive, in relation to, say, economic income distribution in a society, the United States? Would it be possible to expand the sale of the T-shirts, for example, to the whole of the community, or do you think there are limits, even though you base the sale in part on the excellent concept of paying the workers a proper wage?
Based on the results that we've seen so far, I'm absolutely convinced that this is not a small niche market. This is a movement, it's not a fad, and I can envision the day when Alta Gracia is the biggest part of our business. And I believe that that will happen. And again, it's not just because I want it to happen. You just look at the numbers. That one report that I shared just came out a month ago talking about the rise in ethical shopping. $57 billion of ethical products purchased by consumers in 2011. I just don't think there's ever going to be a point in time in the near future when anyone in this room, people in this world, are going to say, let's become less environmentally conscious, let's become less socially conscious. I only think it's going to continue to grow.
There were some questions over here. Two different people, so Craig after her.
Good afternoon, my name is Wilma, I'm a student here. I was just wondering with regards to spillover effects for the Dominican Republic, how do your wages compare to other professional jobs in the Dominican Republic? And how do you ensure educated people do not leave their jobs in education or health to go work in sweatshops?
Well, the first question, I do not know how the living wage in the garment industry compares to other professional jobs in the country. I just don't have the answer to it. I know that the garment industry in general is typically the lowest paying wages in most developing countries. So by us coming in and paying 350% higher wages and paying the living wage, it's obviously a dramatic change for this industry. We obviously have a lot of people that are coming to us now that they've seen this model and say, how do we get a job working here? And we're hoping that the business will grow to the point that we have to create more factories and create a lot more jobs in the very near future. It was the second question, do we see people leaving professional jobs to want to come into the garment sector? We have not had, we have not had professionals saying, I want to get into the garment business to make a living wage. We're having the opposite, though, of having a lot of our workers who had to stop their education when they were very young because their families were too poor to be able to send them to school. A lot of our employees are going back to school at night, and we'll lose them. they're through Alta Gracia, they're able to go and get an education at night, and they'll eventually leave and go into other professions that they can make wages even higher than a living wage in the DR. And I'm thrilled about that.
I'm sorry that we couldn't have some of the conversation with the workers that we've been able to have at other places because of the time zone. But when Joe spoke at the University of Washington, which is where I have my other hat, the workers were online, and several of them talked about the day how much they appreciated Alta Gracia, but the day they were looking forward to the day when they left Alta Gracia to take the jobs that they were now completing their education to get.
Yeah, they're able.
It's very moving.
Yeah, they're able to pursue things that they dreamed about of wanting to become when they were kids, and now they have the opportunity to actually see it through and do it.
Jonathan Bonitcher from the London School of Economics. You mentioned...
You took a long trip to get here.
I was so excited. It was amazing to be here today. You mentioned that some people in Georgetown have been doing some work on Alta Gracia. Have they or has anyone else looked at whether initiatives like this have any effect in driving up standards, employment standards within the industry in the Dominican Republic, for example?
I don't think so, because it's never been done before. This is something that's talked about in our industry for over a decade now, but because nobody has actually done it, you weren't able to measure it and see what is the impact, what's going to happen with surrounding factories. And there's two theories as to what will happen. But I can tell you that it has had a ripple effect within the community, and they've done studies on that. Stanford University is doing another study that is measuring the impact of a living wage in the health of the people. How has their health changed? So since we started this a year and a half ago, they met with the employees, and this study has been going on for a year and a half, but we don't have any results as to, and it's too new to say, is it going to make other factories want to say, I want to do this too? What's going to make that happen is the success of this, and consumers ultimately will dictate how big this is going to be. What's happening with the retailers now is the product is selling, and we have retailers like Barnes & Noble, who I mentioned, who said, it's selling so well, it's more profitable for us to sell Alta Gracia than some of the other brands we were carrying, so they're taking more retail space and more dollars in converting it to this brand. And I imagine that we will have competitors who are losing market share as a result of this initiative that will start thinking, maybe I ought to get a piece of this market and compete with them and set up my own living wage standard. And that's competition I'll welcome.
There's a question right here, and then I see one over there. Ronald.
So good afternoon. Have you estimated what percentage of the annual budget allocated for social responsibility? Because as far as I know, each company is required to have social responsibility.
I didn't understand the
I
question.
couldn't catch the first part of the question, sorry.
Yeah, every company, either in USA or other country, is required to have a social responsibility.
Right.
Yes.
Done from the venue you make. So I'm wondering whether you have such kind of activity, because the garment factory is the one that pollute the environment a lot.
So what has been the traditional policy of your company on corporate social responsibility, and is it meeting all the standards, not just the labor standards? Is that?
Yeah,
that's right.
So all the universities that we represent, all of the big brands that we represent, all have codes of conduct that deal with everything, not just wages. It's health, safety, environmental issues, and as a licensee, we're obligated in our code of conduct to meet all of those standards. And what we do, even the factories that we don't own, where we contract manufacture, what we do is we have third-party independent auditors, and every 6 months we make unannounced visits with these independent auditors, and they monitor everything that's in the code of conduct. We're talking about wages today, but you're correct. There's a lot of things that's just as important as the wages as far as the health and safety of the workers. So all of those things are what are measured when these audits are done, including in Alta Gracia.
And one of the things you probably know about the supply chain in all of these kinds of products, it's not just garments, but electronics, and the longer the supply chain, the harder it is for a company to ensure that its subcontractors, because they're way down the line there, are actually meeting the standards. So one of the important things that Knights Apparel has done is to really shorten that supply chain. They can control and make sure that this factory meets those standards.
Which is why we built the factory ourselves and just said, and let's face it, there was a lot of unknowns, there was risk to it, and we decided, you know, we should take 100% of the risk in case it didn't work, but this way we can also control everything happening.
Before Bronwyn gets to her question, I want to follow that up. If I remember right, Joe, and perhaps this is a false memory, the factory had previously existed, and had in fact it was a factory that was the subject of considerable campaigning by students and others to ensure that in its earlier iteration, it had violated, it was a unionized factory that had violated, the company had violated the rights of the unionized workers.
That's true, and the workers tried to unionize at this free trade zone, and basically the factory owners shut the factories down, pulled out, went to a country where there was lower cost of production. And that's how I ended up in this community. I originally was going to do the first factory in Haiti. That's what was on my heart and mind that I wanted to do, but because of obvious infrastructure issues, we weren't able to start it there. And then the labor rights groups and the NGOs that I was talking to told me about this community in the Dominican Republic called Alta Gracia and the labor rights abuses that had gone on there under previous ownership. And this community had like 96% unemployment when it was once a thriving free trade zone. And so the infrastructure was all in place, the people had the experience, so that's how I ended up starting the first factory there.
And you emphasize living wage, but the factory also recognizes the right of the workers to unionize and to engage in collective bargaining, which they have done.
That is true.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn. Right, sorry. You mentioned you've overcome such a wonderful challenge, which is brand recognition, but you also mentioned the role of fair trade in the sort of the movement, the human rights movement. Are you moving down the supply chain, looking at things like fair trade certified cotton, or trying to push further into the supply chain for your ethical footprint, I suppose?
Yeah, you know, it's obviously the goal would be to be completely vertical from every stage. The problem in the deeper you go into the supply chain, usually the fewer suppliers there are. So if we wanted to have, let's say, know that the chemicals that go into dyeing the cotton, that the people who are doing that are also receiving a living wage, it means that brands and companies beside Knights Apparel would also have to support it. Otherwise, you'd be saying, well, they might be getting a living wage from one supplier, but if they're not from everybody else, that's not truly a living wage. A living wage means they're receiving it every single month of the year and not just sometimes. So the goal is try and move this further down the supply chain, and I think the way that we're going to be able to do that is starting where we're at, proving this is a successful, viable business model, and as more brands and more companies in our industry outside of the sports license business say, we can do that too, then we'll be able to move further down the supply chain.
There are two questions, several people back there. Are there any here so we can be sure to, okay, this side of the room gets some questions.
Graham Brophy, from postgraduate student from Sydney Uni. I think it's very admirable that you are paying the living wage. But as pressures develop in a particular country, presumably the living wage goes up. When you discover a lower living wage in another country, how do you deal with that, those sort of temptations?
No, it's a good point. And one of the possibilities is that if we are successful, we're going to have competitors. And a living wage in China or Bangladesh will be substantially less than a living wage in the Dominican Republic. If you wanted to go in and say, okay, where can you implement living wage but still have the lowest cost of labor, you would not go to Central America the way that we did. And that is a possibility. It's a possibility that competitors could go in and say, we'll set up living wage as well, but we'll do it in Bangladesh where the cost of living is lower, and therefore a living wage is also going to be lower. But that would be a good problem for us to face. I haven't had to face it yet, but when we do, I'll be impressed that somebody's decided to go do this in their own factory.
Joe, what percentage of the cost of producing the product is actually represented by the labor costs?
Well,
how much difference would that actually make?
Yeah, and that's interesting when you talk about, okay, so we're paying 350% higher wages. What that means in terms of the total cost of the product, because such a large percent of the cost of a garment comes from raw materials and fabric, not where the labor is at. It basically means that it's a 20%, roughly, a 20% higher garment cost by paying a living wage than paying minimum or prevailing wages.
Interesting.
Which is why we're able to absorb the majority of that and still be competitive at retail with the other brands.
Hi, my name is Bamble. I'm also a student here. I'm a bit fascinated by your business model. You pay a living wage, which is a selling point, in order to get higher volumes. Your profit margin per unit is lower, but the higher volumes means you're more profitable. I guess the challenge going forward is, at the moment, it seems that, despite what you said, a niche, a small percentage of people are getting a living wage. So say everybody did this, suddenly it's no longer a selling point. So you're not getting the extra quantity, the extra volumes, but you are getting the lower profit margin. Is this sustainable for everyone, or is it just something that will always be a niche?
It remains to be seen. I mean, that was the risk when we started this. I mean, we've done something that's been talked about, it's been theorized, but nobody's ever done it before. If let's say it goes to a broad model and everybody else does it, you're right, you no longer have living wage and social responsibility is something that's unique to you, then it will come down to other business principles, and it will come down to the same thing that we built our business originally on, which is service and quality and value and all of the product design. Those things are still part of business, and if we have more competitors, those things will still be a part of the business. So right now, it's a small percent of the market, but only because it's only been recently been made available. The consumer will dictate how big it will be, but I do believe the numbers, I do believe the studies. I don't see this any different than fair trade coffee. That's me. 10 years ago, there was not a big market for fair trade coffee. Today, you can find fair trade coffee in campuses, you can find it in retailers, you can find it it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and I don't think this will be any different. I think that same consumer, that if you give them the ability to purchase a t-shirt or garment that they're going to buy anyway, but they can know that by purchasing this one brand, my purchasing power has the ability to change the lives of the people. I think they'll make that choice. But they are making that choice, I can say. They are already making that choice. Now we're going to find out how big it becomes.
But it sounds like another way to answer that question might be, given what we've been saying about the supply chain generally and going farther down the supply chain, that you can probably stay ahead of the competition in social responsibility.
Well,
you just move to the next level.
Well, this was part of my business case that I didn't mention when I met with my board. One of the questions I asked them when they said, what if it fails? I said, what if it doesn't and somebody else does it first?
Right.
And we're supposed to be the leaders. We're the leaders in this space. Would you rather have a competitor prove that the model works, be the first mover? Being first mover is worth a lot. When other people follow, but if you're the first mover, there's a lot of brand value when you're the first one to do something.
Some more questions?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm studying human rights here, and I was wondering, is your company a member of the UN Global Compact? If it is, why? And if it's not, why not?
Are we a member of what?
UN Global Compact?
UN Global Compact.
No, we're not. We are not a part of the UN Global Compact. One of the universities that I'm working with very closely, some of the professors there were instrumental in the UN Global Compact, and that's at Notre Dame University. And they've been talking to me about joining and using this as is something that they can share with other businesses. So it's something we're exploring. I don't have any reason not to do it. It's just, it hasn't been, our priority has been making this model work, focusing on what we're doing, the media and all the things that we haven't sought any of it out. It's just kind of happened, and same thing with the Global Compact. If it's something that works out in the near future, no reason not to be a part of it, other than time.
Right here.
My name is Jace Garcia. I'm representing Boston University and Albion College. What sort of branding is this Alta Gracia trying to do? When you see like Nike, the Nike swoosh or the Under Armour, I don't even know what they call it, but the symbol for that.
The swoosh.
It's not that swoosh, but yeah. Well, how is Alta Gracia looking to compete with something that has such a so much recognition, not only in the States and in competitive college athletics and universities, but as a global phenomenon?
Yeah, from a branding perspective, I don't know if you noticed in any of the material, we have a very unique A for Alta Gracia, and that's kind of become our swoosh. So every garment has that unique A style on it. That's our icon, our logo, and students have this sign that they do now that represents the A, where they're signing, and you see this on Facebook and the photos, and they're always doing this A sign that's starting to catch on. And listen, we're not going to spend the money that a Nike or somebody like that does. We have no intentions of signing celebrities. It's all grassroots marketing. But I think, that's kind of how Under Armour started. Under Armour started in high schools and it caught on, and it became the brand for the students, and that's what we're seeing happen with Alta Gracia. I never expected the students on college campuses to adopt this brand the way that they have, and it's like it's theirs. I mean, that's the way that they're acting and behaving, and they have trips that they take over to the factory. Half the time we have students in universities that I don't know anything about it. They're just saying, hey, we're planning a trip, we're going. They're doing Skype call with the workers. We're doing workers tours where the students have said, United Students Against Sweatshops, United Students for Fair Trade. We have month-long worker tours where they've said, can we bring some of the employees over and go campus to campus and let them tell the story to other students, and it's spreading.
There's part of the story I'd like you to elaborate a little more, which really has to do with the student groups, which is that for a long time, the Workers' Rights Consortium in the United States and the United States Students Against Sweatshops, USAS, were fighting very hard to get something off the ground, which they called the Designated Supplier Program, which looks an awful lot ultimately like the Alta Gracia factory.
Right.
Where they could be sure that there was business put into a factory by their bookstores and the people buying the logoed items that was actually producing according to a variety of codes of conduct, labor, environment, workers' rights, et cetera. So how much did the student and the WRC campaigns have to do with your sort of developing this? I mean, the way you told the story up there, the students came in sort of after the fact, and they came in strong after the fact, no question about that. On campuses that I'm affiliated with, they've been very much part of the marketing process. But how much did they play a role in helping you to develop it once you got the idea to, or got the commitment to go forward?
I told them I stole the idea from them.
Okay.
They had, you were right. I mean, I mentioned, we were a target as one of the largest suppliers. We were constantly being approached and saying, hey, what are you doing to go above and beyond what's required? Because I've always been a socially conscious businessman, and we probably have one of the most robust CSR programs of any apparel company, and we have way before Alta Gracia. It was just something that I always believed in. But when I started meeting with the students and listening to what they were asking for, that's really how I came up with the idea for the living wage in Alta Gracia. I mean, I knew because of my personal situation, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to use my business and what I do for a living to make a difference in people's lives that my business touches. But it was listening to the students that gave me the idea for actually implementing this, because they've been asking for it for a decade. They've been saying, hey, we want to be able to buy an apparel brand where we know the workers are receiving a living wage. So I stole their idea.
I wanted to emphasize that here because so many of you were students, and a lot of this really is a result of an interaction between a receptive company and a student campaign that blossomed, and that's possible.
Yeah, it was just listening to them. I mean, really listening, as I said. Stop being defensive, sit back, and what are they really asking for?
Right.
And we have a good relationship today.
I think there's another question over here. Good.
So I know that you talked a lot that your marketing is mainly grassroots and you don't have any commercials and you won't rely on celebrity advertising, but has anyone in your company ever come up to you and said you should market it? Because I feel like there are ways you could do it without relying on celebrity, because I, for example, didn't know about this, and I'm pretty sure Knight's Apparel, that whole Alta Gracia thing isn't on our campus, but I feel like if the students knew, they could push more for it.
Yeah, well, when I say we're not marketing it, we don't have any plans of marketing it by paying people to endorse it and promote it. We have a whole social media campaign. So we have a communications firm that runs our whole social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, the events that we're doing on campuses. But no, I have no plans to market it the way that you would market a traditional brand and pay people to promote it and endorse it. Right or wrong, I'm actually meeting with a group of business school students tomorrow, and that was my question. Prior to coming over, I sent them and said, hey, look at our Facebook site, look at what we're doing in social media, look at what we're doing in store with point of purchase, and I want you to tell me how would you do the message differently? So I'm really looking forward to that meeting tomorrow and hearing what would you do? What would you do differently?
Now, the market for Alta Gracia is really the collegiate market, right? So you're not trying to you're competing with Nike on the college campuses and the university campuses, but not for their larger.
Not yet.
Not yet. That was the question.
Oh no, we're going there. No, we are going there. We launched this in college campuses because that's where we have the relationships, and I could go to the biggest retailers and say, listen, whether you believe it or not, I need you to do me a favor. I want to do this, I'm going to do it, I need your support. Just all I'm asking is give it a try. And if it doesn't work, it's all me, but give it an opportunity. That's where we've started it, but we have every intention of taking this to mainstream retail. This has applications in the music industry, and we've been started to be approached by some very famous music groups that have heard about it and said, we don't want our t-shirts being produced on anything but something like this. So it's going to expand and go into traditional retail. We're just using the platform that we have a lot of control in to get it off the ground, but we plan on competing at every level of retail with the other brands out there.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
There was a question over there.
Hi, Jasmine. Jasmine from the University of Sydney. I was just wondering, paying so much more than the
traditional minimum wage in the country, has that resulted in higher costs of living in the Dominican Republic, which could perhaps adversely affect those employees who do not work in your factory in Alta Gracia?
You're a little close to the
Sorry,
mic.
yeah,
It's very hard to hear you. We had this problem with a couple of other people because the resonance in the Great Hall it booms.
Sorry, I'll just repeat that. Paying so much above the traditional minimum wage, has that resulted in a greater cost of living in this community, which might impact workers who do not work at your particular factory?
Has it impacted greater cost of living in the community? No. What's happened is the cost of living hasn't gone up in the community. I mean, the cost for housing and food and transportation is not going to, the only thing that's made it gone up is, inflation, the typical inflation in the local market. What has happened, and a university, Georgetown, published a report on this recently. They talked about the ripple effect of how having paid the living wages to these workers is now spreading out in the community and creating jobs and a source of revenue. So for example, workers can afford to take a taxi to work. So now there's business cropping up, transportation businesses, where people are buying scooters and people can afford to pay them to take them back and forth to work. There's food stands opening up, so instead of people bringing their lunch, they're now going outside, and it's creating those type of people are able to, for the first time, are able to go to the bank and afford to get a loan. And now instead of renting homes, they're starting to build homes, and they're starting to employ people in the construction industry. So it's had a ripple effect, but not where it's increased the cost of living for other people that are in the community.
Question here? Tara's coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Fabio. I'm an engineering student here. I actually study abroad.
You two are going to have to keep it a little
Oh,
farther.
okay, sorry. So since you guys pay 340% higher than the minimum wage, I bet there is a big line of people looking for a job outside of your factory. So how do you deal with this situation and so it won't become too competitive, outside and inside the workplace?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges when we decided to start the factory, is who's going to get the first 100 jobs. And what we did is there's a larger union in the country, there's NGOs and the WRC that all participated in. It was a very scrutinized hiring process to make sure that people weren't getting jobs because they were paying somebody in order to get a job. You have to worry about these type of things. So what we did is work with the local NGOs, the Workers' Rights Consortium, to really monitor the hiring process. And ultimately, myself and my president and my COO reviewed every final decision that the NGOs and the labor groups presented to us. We reviewed each one of the results in the application, so we were part of the process. It was very stringent. Obviously, now that the factory is up and going and people know about it, a lot of people are hoping that this is successful and that we have to hire more people. And we'll go through the same process, but we're so optimistic that when we renovated the first factory, part of the investment was I renovated another factory that's right next door. So we renovated 2 factories, even though we didn't have the volume to even run one. So we're pretty optimistic from day one it's going to expand and we're going to hire more people.
I think that's a great place to stop. They're building more factories, they're hiring more people, and eventually we'll all be able to buy Alta Gracia for all kinds of things, not just with the college logo on it. Joe, thank you very much.